big weekend of football, obviously the divisional round of the playoffs. And I think a ton of guys are facing pressure. We're going to talk about Josh Allen a little later, but I think he's facing the pressure to finally get over Patrick Mahomes and beat him. And Brock Purdy, I think, is facing pressure because, they got 4 all-pros, first-team all-pro players on that team. A lot of people look at him, not me, but a lot of people look at him as the weak link. And if they lose to a Packers team that's the youngest to make the playoffs in nearly 50 years, a lot of people may jump on him if it's, if he doesn't play.
Oh, if he doesn't play well and they lose that game, Chris,
yeah,
he will be abandoned. Well. He will be abandoned if that's the case, that they lose and he doesn't play well. I don't know what San Fran would do, but yeah, he would get tarred and feathered publicly. Oh, there's no doubt about it. Exactly.
And then Lamar Jackson, who we all presume is going to win his second MVP award. The only question really seems to be, will he win it unanimously? But the last time, of course, that he won it unanimously, Rob, they went out very meekly in the playoffs. They lost to the Tennessee Titans as the first seed. Number 1 seed, had the bye and all of that. And Lamar Jackson, Rob, the playoffs have not been kind to him, to say the least. He's 1-3, but that doesn't really sum up, just to keep it real, how bad he's been in the playoffs. And so here's the deal. He's won 58 games in the regular season, which is more than any other quarterback his age. He's 27. Or is he 26? 26 years old. Let me check on his age before we go further. He's 20, just turned 27 10 days ago. So he's 27 years old, won more regular season games than any quarterback his age. That includes, of course, Patrick Mahomes, who sat out his first year. And yet, the only quarterback to win more than 50 games in his first 6 seasons and have fewer postseason wins, Rob, than Lamar is Andy Dalton. Lamar's 1-3. Andy Dalton's 0-4. And it's not just, teams lose. It's a team game. Lamar's thrown 4 touchdowns or has 4 total touchdowns, passing and running, 7 turnovers in those 4 playoff games. And in the regular season, Rob, Lamar's QBR is 65. It's the 7th best in the NFL since he joined the league in 2018. In the playoffs, his QBR is 41.5, second worst among quarterbacks with multiple playoff starts over that span. And he's only ahead of Mitchell Trubisky, and we all know what Trubisky is. So, Rob, I think Lamar, look, if he loses to, say, Kansas City or maybe even Buffalo in the conference championship, but plays fairly well, he doesn't even have to be spectacular. I don't know that he'll get criticized. But if he loses this game to a rookie quarterback, the Houston Texans and C.J. Stroud, who's fantastic, Rob, he's going to get really criticized publicly. And for the time being, people will say, well, yeah, he's great in the regular season. But whether they think it's his style of play or whatever the reason, they will say, we want to see it in the playoffs. Until then, we're not impressed.
Yeah, we've heard that before. And there was a guy that people talked about who wound up with 2 Super Bowls and couldn't win in the playoffs, and he was the best regular season quarterback and 5 MVPs and all that.
Yep.
So we have seen this before. This is not, Peyton Manning is that guy who people just, and he finished his postseason career, Chris, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but a game under 500. I want to say like
Peyton Manning, Rob, playoff record,
right?
14-13.
Okay, so one.
But he only got above 500 when he went to Denver.
Right, but I'm just saying that was what he was. But that's well under. But that's what he said. What people said about him as well.
Yeah, in Denver, and I'm just saying 5-3. So that means he was 9-10 when he left Indianapolis, which is probably what you were thinking about. And Rob, let's keep it real. He's got 2 Super Bowls. The second one they won kind of in spite of him.
Yeah, but he won one. But he won one, and that's ultimately like when you're such a talent, you want to believe that a guy can win at least one championship. I mean, you know how hard it is.
The two does help.
Oh yeah, the two does.
Really,
and he played, and remember he got benched that year and didn't play that great. I don't think he had more than 100 yards or right at 100 yards that game. He was like the Tin Man. But the point is, I think this is by far that moment for Lamar that I'm looking at, because I picked him. I picked him before the year started, Chris, to get to the Super Bowl. I like their team. I like Lamar. I picked them to be MVP, all those things, and they checked all the boxes. They've beaten all the good teams. They've played well, so there's no excuses. They're healthy. They got everything they need to do it, so this is the year for me. Well, I'll really take a look and say, okay, what kind of guy is Lamar? And I'm confident going in the way that they've played. That game, and I know it was just one game, but that game in San Francisco to me was one of those moments for me. And looking at it, it wasn't a playoff game, Chris, obviously, but it felt like there was something on the line. The MVP was on the line. The way people look at the Ravens was on the line. And Lamar flying cross country, playing a team that was on par with them, and some people thought it was the best team in the NFL. You know, like I thought that was a moment. And he performed with flying colors in that moment. And that is the confidence from that game I have about Lamar going into the postseason.
Rob, as great as he was or good as he was in that game, his better game was Miami. Miami, when they beat him 56-19, remember that game, if I remember correctly, wasn't that for the number one seed, or number one seed was on the line?
No, that was a great game.
But touchdowns and a perfect passer rating.
Yeah,
he only had two touchdowns against San Francisco.
I know, but that was still a big game. I thought that was the one where he got the MVP. Like people were like, okay, this guy's the MVP
because it was a combination of him playing well.
Yeah,
and Brock Purdy really struggling. I think Purdy might have entered that game as the number one guy as far as the odds for MVP. But yeah, the bottom line is Lamar was great. And Rob, they beat every good team you placed in front of them. They beat Miami. They beat the Niners, and they beat them soundly. They beat Cleveland. They beat Houston, who they play this weekend. Beat them by 16 points. Now, granted, that was opening weekend, so that was Houston's first game. But, they did beat them. And Lamar said himself after that game he was rusty. Rob, they beat the Rams. They beat Jacksonville. They beat Detroit.
Everybody. Right.
Yeah. So all of that, though, speaks to why there's really no reason for the Ravens not to at least win this game. Now, again, is Kansas City going to flip the switch? I thought they played well against Miami. It's what I expected. I wasn't overly like what they did and what Buffalo did to Pittsburgh didn't change my mind about either team. I expected them to beat those two teams pretty solidly. But obviously those are good teams, and if Baltimore meets them in the conference championship and loses, I'm with you, Rob. I picked them to get to the Super Bowl. And now I've picked them to win it. You picked them to win it in the preseason.
Yeah. I like that team. I think they got everything, Chris, that you need, and they're healthy. I mean, what is not to like? They have a good defense. They can run the football.
Part of the greatness of Lamar this year, Rob, and I think something that is indeed baked into his MVP argument, is that they weren't healthy. He lost his two top running backs, starting with J.K. Dobbins. Mm-hmm. He lost his, all-pro or Pro Bowl tight end, Mark Andrews, his favorite target, his security blanket, they called him. And yet,
that was a big loss.
Likely, yeah, and he still kept moving, and they didn't miss a beat. And so I think that's a big part of why he's also, looks like he's going to win the MVP award. But yeah, it's big for him. He's got to go out and get it done. And so it's a huge game. And I'm with you. I think he will get it done. But it's a lot on the line. And if he doesn't get it done, he will likely be
I will say this, though. I agree with that, but Josh Allen, this is because that team in this window is closed. If they don't beat Kansas City, I really. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in hour 3. I don't want to